So generally, the person who's drawn to spirituality, one of their biggest barriers they find to really looking into their own experience, their biggest barrier is spirituality. That's their barrier. And one of their biggest barriers, because there's as many and maybe more spiritual ideas, spirituality is very prone to what I call magical thinking. It's an area in which, if I can think about it, then it must exist. Or, spirituality is full of a lot of magical thinking. But really, spiritual investigation, really the first thing we have to shine the light of our consciousness on, light of our awareness on, is on our own magical thinking. On the kinds of way that the things we don't even question, that we don't even imagine to question. And of course, like I said, for many people I meet, that the last thing they really question is themselves. We're so busy wondering, how can I get to where I want to get? How can I experience what I want to experience? How can I find the peace or the feelings of love? Or can I find the goodness of God? Or how can I find what I'm looking for? But to really begin to look into, wait a minute, what is it that's searching for all that? What is it that's on the search? It's me, I'm on the search. And how can I know if my search is valid or not if I don't even know what I am? On what basis is my search, what is it rooted in? See? Well, when someone gets to that point, it's a sort of a point of maturity, spiritually and psychologically, and also, I think, intellectually, where we begin to really look. And we see if we don't really know what we are, then we're standing on very shaky ground, are we not? By what means are we going to be very certain of anything? Mm-hmm. So as I said, as we really look inside in our own experience, physical experience, psychological, emotional, intellectual, and we look for ourself in it, curiously we keep not finding it. And yet our mind tells us, wait a minute, I have to be here somewhere, because something's looking into all this. Something must be here that's having all this, what could we say? Existential crisis. Human beings are just full of existential crisis. Are we not? I mean, we try to hide from that. That's why we get interested in most everything we get interested in, so we don't have to really meet that sort of... I mean, to know that you don't know even yourself, that's an existential crisis, you see. If you know it intellectually, it may just be a curiosity. But if you come to know it experientially, then it kind of begins a crisis within you, which is, spiritually speaking, very good. Crisis is good in spirituality. Most people in spirituality think crisis is bad. You see, but no. No crisis probably means dream state. Most of us have to go through some sort of crisis, sometimes many crises, to look into life deeply. To look into life deeply. And isn't it strange that, this is one of my favorite sayings, is that it's difficult. It's hard to think about yourself in any other terms other than a self. Have you ever noticed? That's how culturally conditioned one is. Try to think about yourself in other terms other than a self. The mind kind of goes, no, what? How would I even begin that? What would that possibly look like? And yet, to think of ourselves only in terms of a self It's only familiar because it's what we're taught to do. It's conditioned into us. Now, when I say self, I'm talking about in terms of not just a sort of self-recognition, but I mean a self in the terms of the sort of secret image we have about ourselves. We peel away that and we realize there really isn't any self in it. It's one of the most liberating things. Conceptually, it may be quite frightening or disheartening, but experientially, to realize that actually, deeply, that our whole notion of self is just a notion. And so therefore it's just a notion. It may be a practical notion. It may even at times be a useful or functional notion. But essentially it's just that. It's a notion. It's an assumption. That if you really look at everything you've put yourself into, you find that there really isn't a self in it, in any of it. Not because someone says so, because as I say, I'm not speaking about philosophy or theology, but real investigation. Not a self as an entity. If there is a self at all, and I'm not even talking about self with a capital S, but if there's a self at all, it's really more of a verb. It's not a thing. It's not a static thing. As I said, a self is just a quickly moving, very complex pattern in the mind. And the mind, body, emotions, all this that's constantly changing, swirl fast enough and it gives you the illusion of a self. Just like when you go to the movies. As long as the film is moving in front of the little light projector and the camera, the projector fast enough, it gives you the sense of movement. When it's projected onto the screen, you go pay whatever you pay. I don't know, what do we pay now? $9.50, $10.50? Or is that just for the popcorn? Seems like nowadays the popcorn costs more than the movie. Anyway, that's a whole other subject. But as long as this film is moving quickly in front of this projector lamp, it gives the illusion of movement. But actually, on that film, every one of those frames, there's nothing moving. The frame is totally static. And in a certain sense, this is a metaphorical sense, but our mind moves so quickly, mixed in with, of course, our biological component of the way our brain is structured, the way our body works, all this, and it gives the feeling that there is actually not so much a moving self, but a solid self. That's the illusion, isn't it? But when you really look at that illusion, you eventually see through it. Everything we put self into, there isn't actually a self.